And so I had to be retrained to understand that it's like, this is the work and this is me and this is my world. This is my house. This is my family. This is my friends. And what it did was open up space for those other things to really thrive in a new way. You know, maybe they were fine, but my relationship to those things certainly feels like it has more room to breathe, you know.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast, and I am Yvonne Marchese, your host. Today, I'm talking to Shannon Paris, the community advocate and operations director at the What Works Network, where I'm a member. And she's a total rock star. I can tell you she is a natural connector. She makes it look so easy to bring together a group of diverse small business owners in this community where we share our tips, tools, and frustrations and triumphs. And she's always looking for ways to keep the community engaged. Now, formerly, Shannon was a buyer for 10,000 Villages, which is a fair trade retail nonprofit organization. And during that time, she saw firsthand the amazing effects of business ownership on artisans in developing economies. And she identified herself heavily with her career. So, when she was laid off a few years ago, she found herself a little at sea. We talk about her transition to a career as community manager in a digital workspace that she didn't even know existed, and how that has become a place for her to truly grow into herself. She's discovered that her passion for transforming lives and economies through business leadership is one that she can take with her wherever she lands. Let's go. Miss Shannon, thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, so excited. Me too. Awesome.
Cool. Very cool. So, first of all, of course, a shout out to Tara and What Works. And because that is, of course, how I found you and all your fabulousness.
Thank you. Yeah, back at you.
Yeah, thank you. So my goodness, where should we start? We gotta talk about your whole story and how you come to your here and now. And tell me let's start with what you were doing before you became the community manager for What Works.
Sure. Yeah.
What that changeover was like.
Well, and I always say it was a flowery path because I've done a lot of things. I started
it all.
Yeah. Well, I studied architecture at Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia.
Oh my gosh. I forgot you told me that. Yeah.
But never went into architecture. I've always followed like my passions and my instincts. I ended up, but sometimes life happens and guides you on that path as well. So I'd lived in Savannah for a long time. I was involved in the art and music scene down there. And then I ended up back in Pennsylvania where my family is and where I was from. And I ended up starting a little newsstand. A little brick and mortar newsstand. I did that for like 5 years. That was what I call Business 101.
Wow.
And that was just kind of I don't want to work for anybody. And this opportunity, it's a whole story unto itself, came unto me to start that kind of really on the cheap. I did it for 5 years. It was time to move on.
Was that fresh out of college?
Oh no, this was like, I'd been in Savannah for about a decade or so.
Okay.
I moved there when I was 18. Went to school, stayed another 6 years after school.
Oh, you stayed a long time after.
I stayed a long time. It's a beautiful place. I loved it.
It is gorgeous.
Yeah. And then I was doing this business and I was burnt, crispy. And I came up with an exit strategy. I gave myself a year to sell the business, to try and sell the business. And in the meantime, I ended up actually taking a job at Borders Books and Music, if you remember Borders, which is where I had my fateful meeting with Tara McMullen. We were co-workers there, both managing the place. And So I gave myself that year, didn't manage to sell the business, but ended up closing it. I was at the end of my lease. I had no debt. So I could just close the doors, sold off my inventory, gave my cooler and equipment away to a family member, and it was clean. So
that was a great lesson. What a great way to walk away, actually, right? No debt and just all
time
done now.
To pull the gate down one last time. Yeah. So from there, retail was always the fallback. This was a retail store, and now I was at Borders doing the big box thing. But I really also wanted to get into sort of nonprofit work at that time, is what I started to think about. How do I serve? How do I take my talents and start to bring service into the world with them? And my dad had gone through a heart transplant at that time. And so that had also put that idea of giving back into my spirit.
How old were you at this point?
I was 32 when he got his heart.
Wow.
And it was 2002. So now we know how old I am. That's okay. And so I ended up getting a job at 10,000 Villages, which is a fair trade nonprofit organization that works with artisans in the developing world who are making handicrafts and jewelry. But then 10,000 Villages also has retail stores and e-commerce where they sell those products. So it's the full supply chain. So working with the producers on the ground up, looking at the labor practices in the context where they're working, then bringing those markets from that level to the warehouse at 10,000 Villages and out into the marketplace to the end point in the customer's home.
Wow. So, and you were a buyer for them, right? And you were involved on the maker end of things and traveled a lot, right?
I did. And I did two things. The first half of my career there, I was on the retail side. That was how I got into it from all my retail stuff and my architecture. I got into visual merchandising and store design.
Oh, okay.
So we had a network of 80 stores. I got to travel across the U.S. and meet like-minded people passionate about fair trade all over the country, helping to promote the brand standards, making this, according to what should the store look like, and, how to sell product with display. And then I shifted in the second half of my career there to the buyer position, which was specifically working with our producers in India, because it was such a huge region and such a huge number of products. One person was sort of overseeing that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So I would spend about a month each year on the ground, just all over India, working with umbrella organizations, export organizations, as well as going out and meeting with individual producers, makers, to talk about what their materials and techniques and product design and sampling, and looking at the context, cracking open the books to see how they were paying the workers, talking with the makers themselves to understand if, what change business and income generation was making in their lives, especially for women who were able to work outside of their home.
Yeah.
Or even if they were able to take that work into their home, but to have money in their hands to take agency in a way that was very different, and also in many cases not culturally the norm, was really important to understand. So,
do you have any favorite stories from that time?
Oh my gosh.
Is there anything you could pull up on a whim? I didn't warn you.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
It just occurred to me. That would be cool.
Yeah, no, my favorite story, because you just want to make me cry, I guess.
Uh-oh.
But it's kind of a great story for the time. But we worked with a group of producers who were in a neighborhood in Delhi, Kajuri Khas, which was a slum neighborhood, but huge, the biggest slum neighborhood. I think it was at least 500,000 people. But so this was a small group. It was 14 people. The first time I visited them, there was 14 people working in the workshop. And now they had a long history of connection, their family having a connection to fair trade. So they'd maybe 20 some years prior had made rugs that were sold to the organization. But they lived in a village at that time, and they were Muslim, and they were being persecuted as a minority in that village to the point where people were being killed. So they emigrated to the city, Delhi, in order to escape that persecution, and found themselves needing something to do. So they went back to the export organization that had helped them connect with us prior and said, we need a new skill. We need new income. How can you? And so they set them up with jewelry making. And specifically, they're working with bone jewelry, which is usually like from deceased animals, camel and water buffalo. So the umbrella organization, Terra Projects, got them set up with that. And then they took us to visit them. And it was really the first time they had taken Western buyers in to see the workshop in this slum, because it was definitely dicey, as far as the conditions and the presence of outsiders, because I would definitely be seen as somebody other coming in. And I was nervous. And it just so happened that President Obama was visiting, and there was a ton of extra security in the city.
Oh, wow.
So things were very, very locked down, but here we are going in, and we end up at this workshop, and it was the best visit. It was just wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. Great from a business perspective, great from meeting people, hearing their stories. So the next year we visited again, and we went to visit them. And at the end of our sort of business and product visit, the owner invited us to go up on the roof for a ceremony, and they had trees for us to plant, like a little rubber tree, that just to celebrate our being there. And I looked and I realized there was his father, himself, and his daughter, who were all working, and our lives were just connected like through generations of fair trade, of like working towards justice and poverty alleviation, and finding a better way forward that wasn't the status quo. And I got all emotional.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's right. It's like there in front of you in real terms. I mean, it's one thing to think fair trade and imagine, okay, great, this is helping people, like people, I'll put in air quotes. But then when you see those lives in front of you, like living, breathing. Wow.
And so I started to cry, and then he started to cry, and then we were all crying. And and I remember exchanging, his name was Nassim and his wife's name was Nassima. And I just, we didn't speak the same language. I just remember holding her hand and like just looking into each other's eyes and just feeling this connection and this emotion, and just so many barriers being crossed culturally, structurally, economically, privilege. And so that's a story where I see the difference that intentional work for justice can make through the generations. And so that's the kind of thing that feeds me all the time. Yeah. So,
wow. I was just, you're getting me all gushy too.
Oh, yeah. So
you were there. How long were you in that role? The travel and on the
So I did that
side?
for 3.5, 4 years. That part of it. I did the other work for about 6 or 7 years. So 11 years altogether there.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what happened ultimately is that I was laid off. And it was like, and I'm kind of glad I told that story now, even if it took a little extra time, because that was the level of like engagement and commitment that I felt with that work. Like it felt vocational. It felt like a calling.
Yeah.
And so when I was laid off, I was devastated,
I bet.
and it was the condition of retail at the time, and now we're seeing that even with grander effect here.
What year was that you were laid off?
2017.
Okay.
2017.
Yeah.
At the beginning, January 2017.
Yeah. Retail is taking a hit, huh?
Yeah. Wow. So I found myself at a point of, I was so immersed in, like had mentioned pain points at some point, and like I was so immersed in that story of doing that work, of identifying myself with that work.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very specific mission.
Yes.
When I told you what that organization did, I was saying the mission. And I thought that was my mission.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was laid off, I felt adrift. I felt like my purpose had been taken away.
Sure. Oh my gosh, I can only imagine.
So that was the work, a lot of the, besides like, just having to bring home the bacon, fry it up in the pan and pay the bills.
Sure, of course. And then, but to have meaning to what you do, so important. I mean,
yeah.
I feel silly even comparing this because it was so self-serving, but when, all I had ever wanted to do was theater. That for so many years. And when I stepped away from it because I was done, and I was changing, and I was starting to wonder what I could do beyond that, where I could make a contribution. It had all been about me for so many years, but to step away from that, as you said, feeling adrift, I felt adrift for probably 6 to 8 years. Yes. Somewhere in there. Long time before I found photography, which gave me a whole other outlet. And again, I feel even silly comparing it because you're doing this work of, free trade and impacting people's lives.
Yeah, but the story of the seasons that we have in our life is constant, right? I mean,
right.
I didn't get into the whole story of why did I leave Savannah and move back to Pennsylvania, but that was another situation where life sort of gave me a kick in the pants and said, you're moving on. Like you will be moving on from this. And I felt in that scenario, I felt adrift for years.
Yeah.
I definitely, I can relate to that feeling. And it wasn't, necessary. That's still valid no matter what the setting it's in.
Yeah.
And what the end result is.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you end up then reconnecting with Tara and taking on, because that was what came up next for you, right? You left once you were done with 10,000 Villages. That's when you then stepped into What Works and in your position now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you got it. 100%. Yep.
So what was that transition like?
Yeah. So just sort of, I feel like there were multiple threads of, like I said, you have to pay the bills, paying the bills and keeping the house and the household going, and sort of the self-identity things going on. So I got I can hustle when I need to. So I had like multiple part-time jobs, consulting or doing store display for a friend or making sidewalk signs, whatever you need me to do, I will do it. I showed up. I was like, I will take it. And unemployment and all the things. But in that time, I was like, all right, I've got a little bit of income keeping me afloat. I need to find my next thing. I need to find my purpose. And I'm not going to say that all those things happen cohesively in this process, but they all started to work towards each other. Two of my mantras in this time were never say never. and talk to everyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I was hustling. I was like, my friend was like, you want to do can you come help me do display? And would you do this sidewalk? I was like, you bet I will climb that 11-foot ladder and hang that hammock from the 20-foot ceilings, which sounds like it wouldn't even work, but I was ready and willing to do whatever because it was an opportunity to get out, to stay busy, to make some money, to meet people.
Mm-hmm.
To evaluate what I wanted to do next. Did I want to do more of what I had done in the past? Did I want to do something totally different? Did I want to do something that was a next evolution of what I had done in the past? Just experiment and take that found time to explore.
Yeah.
So part of my talk to everyone was like just calling up folks and being like, I got time. You want to have coffee? So Tara was an old friend, and I just reached out. I said, hey, can we have coffee? And I said, guess what? I got laid off. And I'll never forget this. And I love her to death for it. She said, well, that was stupid of them.
Indeed.
And I was like, yeah. So we just had a great coffee, and we'd been following each other. She knew about 10,000 Villages, and I knew what she was doing but I just knew of it. And it was this crazy thing in the digital world where she wrote books and blogged, and
she
worked with interesting people,
and
I'd see her on social media, and I was like, what? But I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it at all. So she reached out to me shortly after and said, I don't know. It might be below your pay grade. It might be not enough hours for you, but I might have something part-time community management wise. I was like, I do not know what an online community manager is. Do tell me more, because never say never.
Mm-hmm.
So as we continued to talk, I eventually said, well, here's what I need. This is career time. I need full-time.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, well, this is what I need for the business. I need someone in this position full-time to help me take this community to where I want it to go. Mm-hmm. And so we sort of set a timeline with checkpoints all along the way to say, is this working for both of us being able to step out of it if we needed to. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was really exciting because it was this whole new sphere, this digital world that I knew nothing about, but it was a place to apply my people skills.
Yeah. Because
whether you're talking to Nasima and Naseem on the ground in India, the point is, or you're talking to Yvonne or Linda or whomever at the What Works Network, you're trying to understand where they're at, what they're doing, what impact it's making in their life and in other people's lives, and how you can support them.
Yes.
How you can make the connections that they need in order to keep moving forward, whatever that growth looks like for them. So,
right. And this is clearly where you shine.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love to see the whole, what do they say about the boats? Rising tides lift all boats. That's
right.
I love that story, that feeling. So, yeah.
What have you learned about yourself in this, new role as community manager?
Well, and this is what I was thinking about as I was preparing for our conversation too. There are the specifics of the role, but it's also like the change from working for a nonprofit, that identity piece of I am the mission for this cause, that has like this reverent feel around it, Whereas what I learned, if we were to break it down, that is their mission and that is what they do. And I helped move that forward. My mission, I like to help people. And that can look a whole lot of different ways, right? It can look like community management.
Yeah. I will tell you, just, you're making a difference in people's lives, even now. I'm just speaking for me, trying to learn how to run a small business when I have no MBA, I have no business background. It makes a huge difference in my wee little life to have access to all these other people and how they're doing things and how that works. And so kudos to what you guys are doing.
Oh, thank you. Yay.
And I just got all gushy.
I'm keeping it together. Trying to keep it together. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Man, it's amazing. It's so funny how we tie ourselves up in an image of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where I'm going with that, other than, I think sometimes I tend to confuse what I do with who I am.
Exactly. And I think that's something, so beyond just being the community manager or advocate, whatever we call it, in the What Works Network,
mm-hmm.
the opportunity to work in a startup small business.
Yeah.
For someone who, like Tara, who looks at work in a whole different way.
Right.
And facilitates my employment in a whole different way than what I was used to,
mm-hmm.
is like explosively different from where I had come from this corporate background, this sort of nonprofit, they call it the starvation mentality. Like, of course you'll work 30 days straight with no breaks from 7 a.m. till 10, 11, 12 midnight, traveling wherever we send you, because the mission. And I'm not saying I don't believe in it. And I enjoy doing it. But there's a point where it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to be retrained to understand that it's like, this is the work, and this is me, and this is my world, this is my house, this is my family, this are my friends. And what it did was open up space for those other things to really thrive in a new way. Maybe they were fine, but my relationship to those things certainly feels like it has more room to breathe, you know, and that is part of what we as an organization want for each other.
Absolutely.
To be whole people.
That's what I love about it. That's what comes across, for sure. And I mean, you've got a whole, other part of your life, which is music, right?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I was thinking about that. Like,
how does that weave itself into this whole bigger picture? Like, how does that weave in?
Yeah, I'm always just doing it. That is like, it's so funny because I'll be like, oh, I'm not that it's such a part of my DNA. Like, singing is what I do. That's my main instrument, my voice, and a ukulele. Do play the ukulele.
I started to try to learn, but I just haven't had I should say, not that I haven't had the time. I haven't made the time to keep going with it, but such a fun little instrument. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. I just loved it. I have a picture of me holding the ukulele for the very first time. Someone put it in my hands and I'm like, it's like a newborn baby. I'm like, oh, look at you. You're so cute. And then I was like, ding, ding. And they were like, here's how you play a C chord. And I was like, ding, 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 ding. So, yeah. So I'm always doing some little project, whether it's not usually ever been about like making it big and probably to my own chagrin, I do not have much recorded anywhere, but it's probably so much about being in the moment with people with music. Like, there's such a telepathy and a connection that happens when you're making music with people. That's what I love. It's all about connection. I'm just like, that's what drives me and everything. But music is such a in the moment connection that's happening on all these. It's sort of, and it's one of those sort of sublime things where things are happening on all these different levels, and you let go of consciousness for those things to really thrive. I'm sure you feel that in photography in the flow.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes,
When you're really flowing.
Yeah.
Because you've done the work.
Had a fun session, and it was just like, oh, look at that light. Look at that background. Let's go over there.
It's exciting.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, let's go do that, and then literally I'll click the shutter. And when I get a little shiver that goes up my spine, and I'm like, yeah, we got that one.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's ephemeral.
Mm-hmm.
So in the flow, it's happening in a moment, and it's about process and it's about experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I lean too much towards that, finding those moments rather than like documenting and archiving like what happened. And because I'm always just like looking for the next opportunity to make music with someone.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it sounds like it's working for you. I mean, if you really feel the need to document, I'm sure you would, right?
Yeah.
Because that's who you are. You're somebody who gets things done. So maybe for you, that's one of the things I used to love about theater was that ephemeral thing. And it wasn't recorded. It was an experience. It was being in community with all those other people putting that show together.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put on a show. Yeah. And in the end, it's done. And that's it. It's done. Yeah. It's a memory.
It is a memory.
It was an experience, and that's it.
And that experience is going to inform the next experience somehow, some way.
Yes.
There will be some detail of that either a learning or an exciting thing or a fault or a trip up. Something is going to inform the next experience. You got to keep moving to find out, to keep learning, to sort of keep taking it to the next level.
That's life, baby.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then now, so you've been with Tara, has it been like 2-3 years now?
3.5.
How does time go by so fast, right? Is that
3 years? A pandemic time. I can't tell time.
I know. It's so crazy.
3 years, a little over 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then you've kind of moved back towards that. What am I trying to say? Well, you're on the board now, right? For Revolution Lancaster and so you've gone back to the nonprofit.
Yeah. So I've had my toe in some nonprofit work along the way. I was even consulting with a local history museum. I was like helping them with their museum store. So sort of applying those retail things again to that. And then a former member of our What Works network, who turned out to be my neighbor, like 1 block away neighbor. She joined the network to work on her and her husband's branding and design business. But since we were close, we had the chance to have coffee together, and she told me more about a group she was with called Revolution Lancaster, which you can find at revolutionlancaster.com, is a jewelry company. It's a nonprofit who works with local women who are facing homelessness or other barriers or have faced homelessness, teaching them to make jewelry and then selling it through our website and through other wholesalers like retail stores, et cetera. So, so just got to talking with her and feeling like there was an opportunity to bring some of that sort of more concrete product and retail and wholesale experience to bear. And then joined the board last June. So, just really starting to get into it, like trying to understand what it means to be a board member. It's sort of that's a new first time for me. So how do I make sure I'm making space for that and showing up in a way that's useful,
right?
Et cetera. So
going back, so I'm going to take a little step back to, 'cause it occurred to me, you mentioning that that's something new for you. And I think we kind of skipped over this. We kind of skimmed past one of the things that I really like to focus on, which is, so I won't make you say your age when you started with What Works, but in midlife, having to take on doing something radically different, actually, from what you had been doing, at least in the trappings, at least in the industry is different. And all of a sudden you're dealing with all this tech. And how was it for you to step in and have to be a beginner at something?
Well, it's so interesting because I don't know if you saw the newsletter today that Tara put out, but it was her post about how to do the hard work when you're learning a new skill.
And
I
need to check that out.
Yeah, and she talked about different things she learned when she was climbing, and just the idea of there is a mindset that you need to nurture around learning new things. And so I was already pretty comfortable with tech I'm pretty tech savvy. I can usually hop in and figure things out to a point. I'm not building websites or anything like that.
Right.
So I was just excited. So I think excitement and interest, being curious about what was possible, and seeing how things all fit together was really exciting. The fact that there were people to know and to meet at, like, it's not just technology and it's not just code. It's about the people, that this tech supports relationships was also helpful for me. But yeah, there is definitely something to be said, because as I was reading Tara's post this morning and her mindset when she was learning how to climb, I was thinking about how last year I signed up for a program at University of Pennsylvania, and I got into it, and I was trying to reflect if the downfall of that for me, because I lasted a couple, 3-4 weeks, and I backed out. I was like, and I've been reflecting, like, since then, like, was it my mindset? It just was a ton of work.
Okay. So it could have just been a lack of bandwidth.
It might have been a lack of bandwidth, but I do wonder, did I not prepare myself for learning? Did I not cultivate the soil and prepare it to learn? I think there's a little bit of like bandwidth for sure in that. I was just like overwhelmed at the time. And in retrospect, that is a good learning to remind me that there is more than just showing up.
Yeah. I have a theory that, as people in midlife, you come to a certain point and you've got a lot of stuff handled, like that. You've got a lot of things that you know how to do. You got it, and there's comfort in that. There's something about just keeping on doing the do. And I think that can be really tricky to step into something new. I mean, I speak from experience. It puts you in this position where it's so uncomfortable. I think you have that experience. I mean, for me, as a younger person stepping into something new, I certainly had that experience. Of course, anytime you're going to do something new, there's a discomfort. But I think we feel like we should have our ducks in a row by now.
Yes.
And I think we can get in our own way because it's like just from not wanting to look like a newbie, not wanting to. Right?
Totally. Yeah. No, I think that and I think the reason it was successful when I came into What Works was things were set up really well. I think that the onboarding process was wonderful. And I think there has to be, for what you're saying, I think there has to be some humility. and you have to sort of release that comfort and that wanting to be seen as either competent or an expert in order to like be able to fully enter into that learning state.
Yes. Yeah. I
because
think
I was excited
young, though.
Yeah, totally.
Like if you can embrace stepping into something that is new and scary, and you get the butterflies in your stomach and the whole like and I'm learning all these new things. For me, I'm a learning junkie, so for me it's very exciting to take on new things like that. Same time as being scary.
And I've often done that in my life where I'm like, okay, this might seem weird to somebody else, but here's the question I'll ask: when am I going to get the chance again?
Yeah,
like that's a big question for me.
Yeah.
Maybe this sounds weird that I'm going to go do this thing, but when am I going to get the chance to do it again? You know, and same even with learning. So I'd been in, retail for years and years and years. In some form or another, I mean, even at 10,000 Villages, I was still in the retail sphere. And this 10,000 Villages was an old organization. It was established in 1946, like its beginnings. The roots of it were from 1946.
Wow.
With this, and fair trade is an older movement. And what I was seeing, like in the long term, was what Tara was inviting me into was way more innovative, way more cutting edge. And when was I going to get the chance to be invited in to learn from the ground up on something like that? Because that gets harder at our age too.
Yes.
Right? Like to get that invitation.
Yes, it does. Oh my gosh.
Because of the stereotypes of that mindset. Right? So
yes. I'm reading up. I mean, the more I'm doing, the more, I've been, I don't know which episode your number is going to be when it lands out in the world, but I've been 20 something episodes by now. And I am finding, thank you. That was silent applause, people. But what I'm finding is, what started off as like a curiosity about what it is to be in midlife and trying something new and not settling, not kind of just saying, well, this is who I am, just that whole idea of, hey, we're not dead yet. Let's keep rolling. And the more I'm reading and the more I'm researching and trying to find guests and looking into other, looking at books that are studying this, I more and more feel like I want to rejigger the conversation around aging and what people 40s, 50s plus, what we have to offer still. Because we have so much time ahead of us still,
Yeah.
And to think that so many people have had maybe really successful careers and are now being offered packages to step back from a career where they were incredibly successful. And then, it's that whole ageism thing. So like you said, how often are you going to get offered that opportunity to step into something so cutting edge at an age, right? But then I think too, it's not just other people limiting those opportunities for us. It's us too. It's the self-imposed limitations that I think we all need to get past.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good on you for stepping in, girl.
You got to keep that up though, because we all ebb and flow in those, and our abilities to push our own boundaries on those things. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Or also the luck of combined with the luck of finding those situations. But I think you stumble into those things more often if you're open.
Yes.
Right.
One of my last jobs where I was an employee somewhere, my boss is just one of my favorite people still. And one of the things that he would often say was, why not? That was kind of his mantra. He has a very entrepreneurial mindset, and his way of stepping into something is to say, why not? And I was like, oh, I love that. I'm totally going to adopt that. And I try as often as I can, I have to remind myself sometimes,
why not? Which is kind of like my never say never.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Uh-huh.
But one of the other things that has been helpful on this journey is to get really clear and to sort of cut out background noise.
Ooh, tell me more about this.
Well, I've just tried to be more, as I get older, being of a certain age.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about this in terms of like, one of the benefits of our age is like all the experience and all the insights, which can be wisdom that you bring to bear on situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I like going through something kind of almost traumatic with getting laid off from this thing that felt vocational, that was so important to me, being brought into this new sort of working situation where I'm, the idea of being a whole person is really respected and nurtured. As that's what makes a great employee, is someone who is nurtured as a whole person. Helped to created space to be able to look at what I really want to do. It created space to make music. It created space to get involved in the different causes that are interesting to me.
Yeah.
I
hear your kitty in the background, by the way. I love it. Sorry.
She's of a certain age herself. So
Shannon warned me that we might hear the kitty cat in the background. I actually love it. So when you were talking about leading into this part of the conversation, you were talking about getting rid of the noise. Do you think that maybe the noise that you've been able to eliminate is the noise of having taken on their mission, that maybe their mission the noise, and now you've had a chance to step up and find your own voice?
No, I think,
is that it?
Yes, I like that. But I think it's the noise of conventional expectations.
Oh, yes.
The noise of expectations in an office of what it means to work, what work means, what achievement means, what accomplishment means, what growth means to identity.
Yes.
Like, I don't have to climb the ladder to accomplish things. And that's kind of always been my MO. I mean, I certainly want to be successful. I want to be able to live the house. Well, but I want to define success in my own way. For me, that means being able to live in a house that I'm happy with and be with people that I'm happy with, and that I can nurture the relationships that are important to me. So I don't always walk that straight path or climb that ladder. So, but those stories are what we're brought up with.
Yes.
So I feel like
the story of that success, I mean, I think there's a story that failure is bad.
Right.
And I think that we limit ourselves from, there's the noise of needing to look successful. Right. And being afraid to take a step into something, because what if I fail? How is that going to look? How am I going to look? And instead of, I guess I'm not sure where I got off on this, but we seem to be taught that failure is bad. And instead of looking at it as like, no, that's opportunity. That's like the chance to learn, as I think you mentioned before.
I was talking about that in music. Like,
yes,
each ephemeral experience has has different moments in it that are going to teach you and inform the next ephemeral experience.
Yes.
Right?
Be it something that was exciting and great, or something that tanked and now is going to inform that next experience.
Yeah.
Right. And absolutely. Absolutely. Whew.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that also in terms of, because you and I talked before this, and I was thinking about it again today, getting nervous about, like, there's always like, what's the next 5 years hold for you? And what, what's the future? And what I've realized is, like, it's okay to enjoy this moment. I'm not denying the need to plan for your future, but I also worked really hard to get right here, right now, with that work on identity, with, work on personal issues, with the work on that I've done here at my job. Last year, I spent about a year fixing up my old house, and it was always my dream to live close by the water. And I ended up moving into this newer house in January. Well, new to me. It's built in 1840. So I moved into this awesome historic house in this little fun, beautiful town on the Susquehanna River in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Like, it's been a busy 3.5 years,
Yeah.
It's been a busy season, and there's a lot going on in the world.
Yes.
So I'm not buying into this story that I have to now plan what my next big thing is. I'm kind of enjoying what I have right now.
Yeah.
Not that I'm denying the need to plan and grow, but I feel like we spend so much time working, climbing, achieving, growing. It's like, well, when do you get to enjoy what you're working for?
Right.
Like, is that going to be after I'm dead?
Right. Oh my gosh. Such a good point. Yeah. If you're always, I do find I'm so future driven that I really do have to be very conscientious about taking a step back to doing that. Like, oh, wow, I do have it really good right now, but there'll be different seasons, right? Right. Oh, yeah.
Because I wouldn't be here if I didn't have seasons like that got me here.
Yeah. It's 50-50. You got, everybody's got their season for, you got some good stuff going on in your life. And then you got the crapper stuff going on in your life. And that's going to happen for all of us. And you never know when. Right. And man, just trying to just enjoy. I guess it's like, I've heard it from a couple of different places. Of course, On Being, it's one of my favorite podcasts. I think I wish I could remember who she was interviewing. It was a rabbi, and he was talking about finding joy. And he was like, of course, you're not going to find happiness in everything and all the, there's bad stuff that happens in the world, but you can find joy in every moment. You can find something to be joyful about in every moment. You don't have to be joyful about everything,
Yeah. What do we bring to the moment?
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you, well, as long as we're talking about On Being and stuff like that, what are you reading, watching? What has there been anything that has been like a book that you can look to, or some movie that rocked your world that has kind of formed your sensibilities and who you are?
Well, this will make perfect sense. This is what I was thinking about before we talked. 2 books that I wrote down thinking about this were Women Who Run with the Wolves. Do you know that, by Clarissa Pinkola Estes?
I have heard of it, but I have not read it. Ooh, okay. All right, good.
And it's one of those books that I always have, and I'll just dip in and I'll open, and it. But she sort of explores myth, but kind of with a feminist lens, and she looks at stories and storytelling and sort of breaks that down to look at what it's saying about the psyche of women And so there's always a lot of growth opportunity. Just by reading it, it's kind of like an oracle for me. Whenever I dip into one of those stories.
It's one that I've heard mentioned a lot and has not ever made it to my book list for some reason. So that's going on. Okay.
That's one that I've definitely bought and given away, had multiple copies of, as is Siddhartha. By Hermann Hesse.
Mm-hmm. I haven't read that in a long time. I need to go back to that.
I've read that many, many times. And I think I have 2 copies right now because I've given away so many that I ended up thinking I didn't have one and bought an extra one. So, but I do, that is definitely a book about mindfulness and presence. And, so living here by the river now, I love that. Like I'll just go and sit by the river and listen. And especially at the beginning of the pandemic, it was just a place where I could go and just feel like nature was kind of above all of the noise, all of the complications that we put upon each other with everything that's happening in the country and in the world. So that is a story that is highly influential on me. Definitely.
Wow. And what are you reading now, or any movies, any shows you're binging on?
Well, I'm binging Schitt's Creek.
Oh, are you? All right.
I love it. They're such great characters and they're just silly and they're having fun. I mean, they're just great. They're just super fun. It's a fun show. I think that would be the one that I'm enjoying the most right now.
Fantastic. All right. So I'm going to put a bunch of links in the show notes for people to go check out your favorite stuff. So my gosh, thank you so much for being here with me. And what are you excited about? What's coming up for you? I mean, we've talked about the Revolution Lancaster, which is so cool. I went to the website and, one of the things that really struck me about that, let me just share with you. I love this. It was in the About section on it. It was talking about how the founders went in. It said they would braid hair, paint nails, and listen. Many of the women at the shelter mentioned that they had not had positive physical touch in a long time. That just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, the community piece was really where it started. They were going in to have just community nights with women for women. And they were, like I said, painting nails and braiding hair just to provide an opportunity. And that evolved into the jewelry making as an opportunity. And then with the pandemic, that's really fallen apart. So unfortunately.
Wow. That is too bad. Because what they were doing is teaching women to make jewelry so that could be sold. And then those women have some income from that jewelry. Right.
Yes. And again, that is started back up.
Oh, good.
So that piece is slowly, working in with social distance and masks. Those workshops happen once a week. But the community nights haven't been able to pick back up yet. And we're not really sure what that'll look like, but it's still part of our DNA. So we'll see what that'll evolve into as everything shifts. But that is what I'm really excited about. Really enjoying that. We're in 2 weeks, Lancaster County, where I live in Pennsylvania, does a great day of giving called the Extra Give. And it is just a day where 500 or so nonprofits, I hope I'm not making that number up, but I believe that's a pretty accurate number, kind of the whole day is about giving. And it's kind of like a festival of giving. And it's happening like in pre-2020 times. It was like downtown was a giant takeover. They took over the Marriott Hotel and there were lights and shining things. So this year it'll be virtual, but they've raised in a single day, they've raised $10 million. Wow. In our county of 500,000 people.
Holy cannoli.
So all of
wow.
the many nonprofits in this area really look forward to this as like a major injection in their fundraising. And really it's just a day to like hold each other up and to recognize the philanthropy and to recognize who's being served and who's doing that service. So we'll be participating in that. And we have an artist who's going to be drawing a mural for that, painting a mural on a wall downtown.
Very cool.
So that's extragive.org is if anybody wants to check that out, but
extragiveback.org. Is that right?
Extragive.org.
Extragive.org. Okay.
It's just a really cool thing to check out, even if you want to think about something for your own community.
Awesome. I wonder, what's the date on that? Because I wonder if your episode will be out by then. It might. We might be able to get
November
this out
22nd.
I think I can get this. Yeah, I think I can get your episode in time so that people, if you want to check this out, it's probably instead of 2 weeks away, it might be about a week away from when you hear this. But very cool.
And then you can look for Revolution Lancaster on their website if you want to donate, or visit revolutionlancaster.com if you want to look at the beautiful jewelry.
It's some really cool looking jewelry, by the way. Some very cool stuff. So awesome. Oh, good. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, I was looking at it and I was like, oh, Christmas is coming. Well, you guys can't see, but we're on a Zoom call here and Shannon is modeling her bracelets and necklaces for me. And so cute and pretty. Very cool. Shannon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
I knew I was going to love having you here to talk to. And it's so funny because sometimes the conversations I'm like, it was one of those great ones where it was like, I just feel like we met to have coffee. Like,
oh, good. That's good because I was like, gosh, it's weird to talk about yourself, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
So I'm always like, I'm not quite. So I kind of look at it as like a coffee chat.
Maybe I'll rename the podcast Coffee Chats or something like that. Well, there you have it. If you want to know more about Shannon, the What Works Network, or Revolution Lancaster, I'll have that information for you in the show notes. Just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and click on the show notes for episode 24. Hey, next week is Thanksgiving, and I hope you'll join me for a special episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you got something out of this today, please take a minute to leave a rating and or a review. If you're listening in the Apple Podcasts app, you can easily go to the main page of the podcast, just scroll on down to where you'll see ratings and reviews, and you can choose anywhere from 1 to 5 stars to give it a simple rating super quick. And if you want to leave an actual review, scroll down just a little further and you'll see a little checkbox that says write a review. Reviews really help spread the word about the podcast, and I'd really appreciate your help. I hope you have a fantastic week. Stay safe and well. Talk soon.